one of the biggest questions that I get, having coached businesses for more than 2 decades now, is what's the most important thing in any company? Like, if you're going to do one thing, what do you do? If you're going to not mess up one thing, what is that one thing? And the most important thing that I say over and over and over again, and I'm hoping to get this in everybody's head so much that ever works with driven relationships, or any small business owner I ever worked with, the most important thing in your entire company is your database. And the reason for this, at first, it might sound like, oh yeah, I got all this technical stuff I got to do. I got to do good at my job. The market's really important. We can come up with 100 different reasons: your P&L, profitability, all of that. Your database is everything. And today I want to show you this, show you why. And in the future, when you work with any of us, and we're going to ask you, what's the most important thing in your entire company? It's always your database. When we buy another company, or when I've helped companies sell companies, people want to know how big is your client base and how loyal is that client base. And if you've studied this at all, you're probably familiar with Net Promoter Score, which becomes a really big thing to measure how loyal a client base is to a company. Well, why is that important when we think about a company? Well, number one is the math just makes sense on it, which I'm going to show you here in a second. But I want to give you the psychology of this first, okay, and why this matters. All right. What they did, I'd say about 10 years ago, a lot of companies had this big, kind of push for customer service. And if you guys have been in the business world a long time, you remember when people talked about customer service all the time. Well, the big thing about customer service was they started asking people, like, let's say at a restaurant or a hotel, if you came into this restaurant and you'd say, hey, how was the food? It was great, 10. How was the service? It was a 10. How was the atmosphere? It was a 10. And then they would say to people, will you come back? And they would say, I don't know. And people started to realize that customer service wasn't the big thing anymore. And a lot of this was the information age, which we'll go into this more at another time. But the information age really began to change the way people download information, the loyalty that we see, the consumer began to change in a huge way. And so what we realized was we have to change the way we think about business, and we have to change where we focus. And we can do all of that from a really proven set of foundational thoughts and skills on how we do it. So the first one is, and this is what I've seen with businesses, Abraham Maslow was one of the only psychologists, especially back in his day, that studied healthy, successful people, said that the story of the human race is a story of men and women selling themselves short. And as a coach, this has been the biggest thing to me that always surprises me. I see people with incredible talent, with the right skills, the right attitude, but they just don't focus on the right things, and it leaves stuff out of the race for them. And often those things are the smaller things that have to be developed over a long period of time that people don't focus on. To give you an example, in real estate, when I started coaching loan officers and agents a long time ago, one of the things that I saw was people that had been in the industry for 10 years and they were still chasing leads. And I was like, why are you've been in this business for 10 years. How are you still chasing leads? Your phone should be ringing all the time. And people would be like, well, what do you mean? I'm always doing this. It's like, no, think of all the people you've met over the last 10 years. Every one of them is going to move every 5 to 7 years. So if you just do the math on that, if you know 1,000 people, 200 of them are going to move every year if you've been in front of that database for 5 years. Most people do really well if they're selling 200 homes a year, 200 listings, or if you get the buy side, it's 400. And that's just with only 1,000 people. So it becomes really simple. If you're in an industry, develop your client base, keep them loyal, and you won't have to worry about anything else. It's the #1 marketing thing ever. And nobody was doing it, which is where driven relationships got built.